Why hello there, welcome back to yet another video, and today, just a short video talking about discs versus downloads. Okay, so why am I doing this? One, because people actually asked that I covered this, so I thought, why not? And two, because, yeah, there's probably a bit that needs to be said on the subject as we get into the most recent generation in, give or take, a month or two. So what's the big deal? So obviously you've got discs and you've got downloads. The difference between them is, of course, one, you have a physical copy of a game, the other one, you have got a digital license, which has got a whole lot of issues about it, which I can understand why people don't like it. Now obviously back in, let's be generous and say 5 years ago, the number one way to buy a game would be to have a physical copy of it, an actual disc, and you know, maybe if you were feeling like it, get a digital copy because, you know, you might have bought a fancy hard drive for your console, or, you know, you play on PC, because PCs haven't really sold physical copies in quite a while. I mean, they do sell, just not like they normally would. Now, I guess we should probably start with what's the benefits of each? Well, we'll start with discs. Now, benefits of having a disc is no matter what, regardless of what happens to the game, whether it requires services or whatever, you will still have a physical copy of the game that you will not be able to lose. Period. Unless, of course, you know, you break the game physically, or you actually lose the disc itself. But for the most part, you have got a copy of the game that you cannot lose regardless. Now, most of the time, it will mean that you've essentially got full security that you can play your game, regardless, as long as you've got a working system that can run the copy of the game that you have. Obviously, if it's a PlayStation, a PlayStation, Xbox, PC, you get the idea. And also, you know, it's a nice physical item. It could be considered a collectible for some people, so there's a benefit to that too. But it does have a couple of caveats. For one, it's a lot slower to load most of the time. Now, there's two ways that really you can load disc games. Now, the traditional way would be to go ahead and put the disc into the console, and then the console read all the information off the disc as it needs it. Problem with this is it's really, really slow. Alternatively, what they often do and can do is instead they go ahead and install all the files to a local hard drive, and then go ahead and keep the disk as well, verifying that you do actually have a license to run all the files. And that's generally what PC gaming has been doing for quite a while, and what, well, the Xbox 360 was doing up until the Xbox One. As you may remember, you know, so like on 360 you could grab your game, install it onto the hard drive. You don't have to, but you could install it to the hard drive by go ahead and essentially copying all the files off the disk onto it, and then that'll go ahead and help improve load times. Or, you know, if your disk gets scratched up, you can still play it because it's not playing it off the disk, it's playing it off the hard drive. But generally, the whole benefits are you have a physical copy, it's safe, and you can't lose it. Downsides are it's slow, you have to install it anyway if you really want the speed, and a few other niggling little issues. Now, on the other hand, you do have digital games, which, for the most part, they make a lot of sense. You know, it doesn't have to take up any physical real estate. You have got only room on your hard drive. When you buy one, you don't necessarily have to keep a copy on hand. You can keep it wherever the hell you want it. You know, if say you've bought a copy of a game on Xbox, well, guess what? You don't have to install it until you want to, and it will always be there regardless if you install it or not, which is great for you. But then you've got the issues of what we were talking about earlier, is that this is a copy that is dependent on others to work. For example, if Microsoft went bankrupt tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to play it anymore because there would be no way for you to download the game from Microsoft or off any of the servers in general in order to play it. You know, other things like long-term support, it's all really down to the developers and the people that own the rights to the game. Because really it's more of a license to use it conditionally rather than unconditionally. Don't go ahead and take this too much, but essentially conditionally being that are conditions that are required for it to actually be able to be used, not conditions as in what you're allowed to do. That's completely different, that's copyright, and we'll get into that another time. But essentially, if you do want to play a a digital-only game, one, you need to make sure that the people that you're buying from still exist, because there's no point buying a license for something that you can't download or install anymore. And, well, the fact that it takes even longer to install than a disc, debatably, depending on your internet speed. If you've got, let's say, 10 gigabyte disc, and you can read that disc at say 20 to 30 megabytes a second, that's great. But if you've only got like 5 to 10 megabit internet, that's like 1 to 2 megabytes a second, which is a lot slower. It's not so much that it's a worse option, it's just there are caveats that come with it as well. Now, me personally, I prefer physical copies of stuff, but the problem with that is that not many people like making physical copies, because physical copies are physical copies, and physical stuff actually requires money to go ahead and buy and produce. Whereas a digital copy, it's literally just however much space you need to put onto a server, and that's it. You don't have to spend millions upon millions buying cases, getting prints done for the artwork. You don't have to go ahead and print off a manual. You don't have to go ahead and burn so many CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays and whatever in order to go ahead and distribute your game. It's literally put it onto a server and you're done. Or even better yet, rent a server, which is sort of the reason why not many companies actually like to make them, because whilst they are very nice to have, they would much rather you have a digital copy, because on top of that, it also still gives them a lot more legal leeway, which, like I say, we'll get into another time. But you get the general idea. You can buy a digital copy or a physical copy, but at the end of the day, it matters to who you're buying from. Like, don't get me wrong, digital games, there is nothing wrong with them, for the most part. But you must almost be aware that there may be requirements or services as part of them that make them completely impossible to use in 10 years' time. You know, whereas certain things, like actual physical copies of games, they don't really change, and more so if you don't have the updates installed on something, it will work like it was first intended to. Take an example, Battle Station Pacific. It's a great game, made I think it was like 2008, 12 years, either 2008 or 2007, great game, highly recommend you play it. Problem is you can only play it on console because the PC version is broken, because it requires, I think it's Windows Live, something live service for games in order to actually play the game, because you need to be signed in order to play it. The problem with this, typing DRM and that lot, is that those servers have been long since shut down, and this would also be an issue if you had a physical copy, although it might work differently. Basically, you need to be signed in there, you know, whereas an older copy on, say, a console, well, they know that it may well be played fully offline anyway, so they still have to integrate the entire game into it, even if it's never going to actually be played online, because obviously the game needs to be able to run regardless of what the situation is. And this doesn't say that, you know, old games on console won't, you know, ever not work. It's just saying that sometimes they will work longer than their PC counterparts or other counterparts because they don't have as many digital services that aren't tied onto them. This is a bit of a different argument, but you're getting into the same thing. Sometimes even the same game will only work on one platform because it's still using a physical copy that had to have certain requirements about it in order for it to really be a sellable copy back in the day rather than currently. So yeah, that's a couple of things. But there is one last thing that I want you to be aware of. If you do buy physical copies, like say DVDs, CDs, whatever, be aware there is a small issue. We are actually now starting to approach the age where the first CDs and DVDs, yeah, they're not actually going to be starting to degrade, as in the actual plastic itself will regardless be starting to rot. So if you are buying physical copies, do be aware they do actually have a specific shelf life and they will only last so long. Another reason why you might want to go digital, because no matter what, you still have a physical copy. Even if it's 30 years down the line, you will still have a copy of it. But if you buy a physical copy 30 years down the line, that DVD, CD, whatever, could be so deteriorated that the next time you put it into your disc player or DVD drive or whatever you're actually having to plug it into, it could just completely fall apart. So that is another possibility on issue long term, but it's complicated. Like everything, there's like, it depends. I know nobody likes it as an answer, but go for what you feel is right. If you feel that you like a big collection of games, get a big collection of games, but do be aware, everything's a shelf life. And give or take, everything's somewhat conditional. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Like if you like it, dislike if you dislike it. Any thoughts or questions, leave a form of a comment down below. Don't forget to check out my Discord, Facebook, Patreon, and Twitch page, all of which you can find down in the description below. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more content from me. As always, I always forget something. And well, this is the 117th one, signing off. Stay safe out there, folks, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Until then, ta-ra.